Bienvenidos to our 10th annual Hispanic Latino Studies Virtual Summer Institute. I'm Juliana Knight, a 6th-grade student from Wansby Duncan Middle School. At this time, Valerie Osa will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by singing the national anthem.
Juramento a la bandera. Juro lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose first stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the realms that we went, were so glad streaming, and the rockets reckless, and the bells bursting air gave proof through the night that a flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, or the home of their brave?
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you, Valerie. And now please help me welcome our Administrative Program Planner for Hispanic Latino Studies, Mrs. Patricia Trejo.
Gracias, Juliana. And wow, Valerie, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us. Saludos y bienvenidos. Gracias for joining us here today, this afternoon, this morning, depending on when you are joining us. I'm delighted to see that we have national participation as we mark our 10th year in providing professional learning that adheres to the Florida Mandate 1003.42P, which requires all of our students, and that's all of our students, to learn about Hispanic contributions made to the United States. So today, we're going to be celebrando the culture, educational achievements, and the contributions of Hispanic Latinos that have made a significant impact in our educational system. So let's begin with leaning in and learning so that we can elevate our instructional practices to infuse Hispanic contributions made to the United States so that all of our students have a learning experience that will reflect themselves and others. So first, help me welcome Dr. Luis Alvarez. He is a professor of history and associate dean for academic personnel and equity, diversity, and inclusion in the School of Arts and Humanities at the University of California, San Diego, where he has also served as a director of the Chicanx Latinx Studies Program and inaugural director of the Institute of Arts and Humanities. He is the author of The Power of the Zoot, Youth Culture and Resistance During World War II, Chicanx, Utopias, Pop Culture and the Politics of the Possible, and co-editor of the Another University is Possible. And he is also one of the legacies of the Lemon Grove incident. And so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk to him a little bit about that also. But first, please help me welcome Dr. Luis Alvarez. Bienvenido, señor.
Hola a todos. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm honored to be here and really help kick things off in what is an amazing program. As Patricia mentioned, I'm an historian who has spent most of my professional life teaching and writing about Latino history, especially the ways our culture is intertwined and connected with the histories of other communities. I'm also the son of an anthropologist and an historian, so I come by this work honestly. I mention this because I think it's crucial that we find ways to remember and learn from our own histories across the generations. And with the time that I have with you all today, I'd like to share a few stories from my most recent book on the history of Chicano and Latino culture. Spoiler alert, I talk a lot about music and art and TV and film and what we might learn from them. I should also say I'm a Southern Californian, born and raised, so my stories lean West Coast, but there are stories like this everywhere. So let me begin with a story from the 1950s. In 1956, little Julian Herrera, who's pictured on top here, had one of the biggest rhythm and blues hits of the year in Los Angeles. His soulful doo-wop style ballad, Lonely, Lonely Nights, turned Herrera into an overnight sensation. He became known across the city for spectacular live performances and was later even compared to a young James Brown. He became a teen idol on the East Side. All the Mexican-American girls went wild for him. And I'd like to play just a little snippet of Lonely, Lonely Nights to give you a taste of the song.
These lonely nights, lonely nights can go on since you've been gone. Though I've been wrong, so wrong, please spare me these lonely nights. These lonely nights.
I could go on listening to that song all day, all evening. But what many of little Julian Herrera's fans may not have known at the time was that he, Herrera, was neither Mexican-American or from LA. He was actually an East Hungarian Jew who had run away from his home in Massachusetts at the age of 11. His given name was actually Ezekiel. He hitchhiked across the country, landed in Southern California. He was taken in by a Mexican-American family in Boyle Heights, a neighborhood in East Los Angeles, and eventually took their surname. The song, Lonely, Lonely Nights, was actually produced by the legendary Johnny Otis. Otis was born the son of Greek immigrants, and he came of age being a drummer, playing African-American jazz and blues joints along Central Avenue in Los Angeles. And by the mid-1950s, when he helped launch Lo Julian Herrera to local stardom in LA, Otis was already on his way to becoming known as the godfather of rhythm and blues. He was regularly harassed by local authorities for creating and promoting music whose performers crossed racial lines. And Otis himself actually considered himself to be, quote unquote, Black by persuasion. He once remarked, "I'm a member of the Black community. Genetically, I'm pure Greek. Physiologically, environmentally, by choice, I'm Black." So Lonely, Lonely Nights, the biggest hit in East Los Angeles in 1956, was a pop hit produced by a Greek American who considered himself African American and sung and performed by an Hungarian Jew who considered himself to be Mexican American. Now, this might seem like an odd place to begin my conversation with you this afternoon, but I take my lead from Otis and Herrera to really talk about the multiracial history of Chicano and Latino culture and civil rights. And what I'll share, and this story that I just shared, comes from my most recent book, Chicanx Utopias, Pop Culture and the Politics of the Possible. The book really traces film, TV, music, visual art from the civil rights movement all the way to the present to show how Chicano and Latino history mixed together, almost like a DJ, mixing sounds, politics, and culture with African Americans, white, and other histories. That's my first big point, is that Chicano and Latino history are full of these cross-racial moments and storylines. My second big point is that Latino culture helps us think about civil rights in different ways. Civil rights wasn't just a Black-white story, as so many of us have been taught, but also a Black-brown and multicolor story. My last big point, there's three of them, is that Chicano and Latino culture, in addition to being beautiful to watch, to listen to, or to dance to, offers glimpses of a better world, hence the utopias in the title of my book. Let me share another story to make my point. And this is kind of my second riff of the afternoon. Lo Julian Herrera was predecessor to what we might call the brown-eyed soul music scene of the 1960s and 70s. In those years, Mexican-American bands, some of you may be familiar with, like Cannibal and the Headhunters, the Midnighters, were part of a kind of multiracial audio thicket that blended Black and brown in a mix of rock and soul, jazz, rhythm and blues, country, western, even Mexican and Caribbean rhythms, all kind of rolled up into one. And they made their music right along the struggle, the urgency of civil rights, providing a kind of soundtrack to the Chicano and civil rights movement that flouted segregation and offered glimpses of a kind of different world of racial equality. And one place where this happened was at the Phillips Music Company on a little street called Brooklyn Avenue in Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles. It was owned by this gentleman, Bill Phillips. Here he is pictured around 1950 at the counter of his store. Then the glass case, you might be able to make out albums titled Mexicana, and the one to the left called Jewish Dances, centered in the case. Phillips was actually born William Isaacs in 1910 in Rochester, and he was another runaway. He was born to a Russian Jew father and an Austrian Jew mother, ran away from home, and with a fudged birth certificate, joined the Navy before he turned 16. When the Navy sent him to Norfolk, Virginia, he learned to play the drums, became a stalwart in the Navy band, and eventually settled in East Los Angeles, married, and opened his store in 1935. He sold 78 RPM records, those old school records, sheet music and instruments, mainly trumpets, trombones, and clarinets. Of the 5 music shops in Boyle Heights, Phillips Music Company was the only one to survive the Depression, leaving it with really little competition as World War II in the 1940s began. The location of his store on Brooklyn Avenue and its success were not unrelated. As some of you may know, in the mid-1930s, Brooklyn Avenue was the bustling center of a flourishing neighborhood, home not just to more than 30,000 Jewish Americans, but the Boyle Heights neighborhood they shared with more than 15,000 Mexicans, more than 5,000 Japanese, many of whom were about to be interned during the Second World War, and a smattering of Russians and Syrians and Armenians and African Americans, Filipinos, Chinese, and more. In 1938, the student body at Boyle Heights' Roosevelt High School was 40% Jewish and among the primary clientele at Phillips Music Company. But in the ensuing decade, Boyle Heights and East LA, as many of us know, changed. Thousands of folks left the neighborhood for West LA or the Inland Valley. Phillips joined this outmigration, moving with his wife Anna and twin boys to Beverly Hills, yet he kept his store in Boyle Heights, commuting daily well into the 1980s. Here you see the storefront of Phillips Music Company. And by the 1960s, the store had become a kind of community melting pot. Roosevelt High School students still flocked to his store, but the school, Boyle Heights, and the larger East Side in LA had changed. More Mexican and Mexican Americans had moved in, along with Japanese Americans who returned from the internment camps. And the daily streets and schools and workplaces were all filled with exchanges between Mexican Americans, Japanese Americans, African Americans, the remaining Jewish residents, and Phillips Music Company became one of the really kind of main hangout spots for youth interested in music across the East Side. You could stop by and not buy records, you could just listen to Latin jazz, to rock, mambo, cumbia, and Yiddish swing records still that helped make up the East Side sound. Phillips even gave 50-cent music lessons to Roosevelt students, including some really remarkable musicians, folks like Paul Lopez, Chico Sesma, Don Tosti, who were all around in the 40s and 50s, all on their own right, on the way to becoming musical legends in East Los Angeles. He allowed kids with an interest in music to jam in the store after hours. With his eye for talent, he introduced Mexican American musicians to industry contacts in Hollywood, the music joints along Central Avenue, and eventually his customers included even more famous musicians, folks who became members in bands like the Midnighters, Los Lobos, or Olin over the years, and many, many more. In a gesture reflective of Phillips and the kind of place his store was, shortly after World War II, he gave a small corner of his store to a guy named Kenji Taniguchi upon Kenji's return from the internment camps to Boyle Heights. Taniguchi sold sporting goods equipment and soon opened his own store down the street called Kenny's Sporting Goods, and it grew into being one of the biggest sporting goods stores on the East Side. In another instance, kind of emblematic of this cross-cultural, multiracial scene that Phillips Music Company was a part of, the song Tico Tico was a hot seller after the Jewish band Mickey Katz and his kosher jammers, they were called, performed the song live during their LA tour in the early 50s. The song was actually written in Brazil, but Mickey Katz interpreted it by mixing Spanish, English, and Yiddish under a kind of klezmer beat. And the Mexican-American fans who rolled into Phillips' store looking and requesting to buy the new hit asked for the new song from Miguelito Katz. Phillips's store reflected the kind of diversity of Boyle Heights, and there was a kind of mariachi, klezmer, taiko beat of the East Side that was pulsating in these days. This was the culture and the music in the 50s and 60s, but the music was also part of a larger world of political action and civil rights. It shouldn't be surprising that during the 1950s, Bill Phillips sat on the board of the Soto, Michigan Community Center in East LA, an organization that collaborated with the NAACP, the Japanese American Citizens League, the Mexican American Community Service Organization, and LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. They also supported the LA chapter of the Committee for the Protection of the Foreign Born. And this was all to fight for immigrant rights, to expose kind of this 1950s era Cold War red baiting. Phillips was also the first co-chair of the political campaign to elect Ed Roybal to the LA City Council. Although Roybal lost, he would later go on to win, becoming the first Mexican-American city council member since the 1880s, in nearly 100 years. And Roybal would go on to represent the US Congress for 30 years, representing the Boyle Heights district. So my point here is that the intersecting sounds, the mix of the sounds that we hear in the Phillips Music Company were also evident in civil rights. And this continued as we moved into the 1960s and 70s. Could go on with countless examples of Chicano and Latino music spreading more of the same kind of multiracial message. One of my favorites is the classic brown-eyed soul jam Viva Tirado by the East LA band El Chicano. Some of you may know the song, but it hit number 28 in the Billboard Top 100 in May of 1970. It had this kind of eclectic mix of rock and jazz, helped make it the first song to hit every single Billboard category save country and Western. It might seem odd that a band named El Chicano appealed to such a diverse audience, especially since the group had recently changed their name from the generic sounding VIPs to align with the Chicano movement's critique of racism and poverty. The result was really a kind of confusion over who El Chicano was, how their music should be classified. And former band member Bobby Espinosa remembers when they were on tour in New York, an example of this kind of confusion. He said, they didn't know where to book us. We ended up playing a show at the Apollo Theater with the OJs, Jerry Butler, the Last Poets, all these Black groups. They didn't know what we were. They'd say, what are you guys, Indians? What's a Chicano? What's a Latino? The longer history of the song Viva Tirado, one of their big hits, explains a lot, however. The song was originally written by a guy named Gerald Wilson, who was a Black trumpeter, composer, and jazz man. Gerald Wilson, was born in Mississippi, grew up in Chicago, and made a name for himself as part of the LA jazz scene in the 1940s. His original version of Viva Tirado actually paid homage to a Mexican matador named Jose Ramon Tirado, hence the song Viva Tirado. This was a salute inspired by Gerald Wilson's really love and affection for music, Mexican music and culture. So Viva Tirado, like so much Chicano and Latino music and culture, was built on this kind of multiracial roots laid by folks like Lil Julian Herrera, Johnny Otis, Bill Phillips, and others. I want to share one more riff or example from my book, if you don't mind. Shifting gears just slightly. Some of you may be old enough to remember that this kind of multiracial Latino vibe made its way into 1970s network TV also. For the first time, we begin to see Chicano and Latino characters on primetime sitcoms like Chico and the Man, pictured here, or Welcome Back, Kotter, two of my own favorites when I was a kid growing up. These programs really shed light on what race relations in America could be after the civil rights movement. They promoted a kind of racial utopia and the resolution of racial conflict as really achievable, tangible goals. Let's take Chico and the Man as an example. It aired in primetime from 1974 to 78. It was set in the East LA barrio, and it starred Freddie Prinze here on the left and Jack Albertson pictured with Prinze on the right. It centered on the relationship between Chico, a kind of enterprising young Chicano Vietnam War vet from the neighborhood of East LA, played by Freddie Prinze, and Ed Brown, who was kind of a curmudgeonly Archie Bunker type, played by Jack Albertson. Brown owned a rundown mechanic's garage where he watched his neighborhood and clientele become increasingly Mexican. And based on kind of Ed's off-color sense of humor and Chico's witty, endearing jokes in return, the series kind of tracked the two men's cultural and generational conflict and respect and affection for one another. It was the first show to feature a Chicano character, and it made Chico's ethnic identity and politics known from the beginning. In the pilot episode, for example, Chico encounters two police officers that interrogate him in the garage. They suspect him of a robbery, and they call him insulting names like Pancho and Beaner and ask if he has papers to prove that he was born in the US. Chico responds by saying, "Why? You got papers to prove where you were born? I'm a Chicano, man. I was born in this country. And what's more, we had it first. I habla your English. Why can't you habla a little of my Espanol?" Now, remember, this was rare for TV in the 1970s, maybe not so much for Netflix these days, but as other sitcoms in the 70s did for the African-American experience, Chico and the Man addressed racial issues of the day and really kind of introduced the Chicano movement and barrio life to an average of 40 million viewers a week. Despite its early ratings successes and novelty in starring a Chicano character, Chico and the Man drew considerable ire from Chicano activists all across Los Angeles, the Southwest, and the country. Their main complaint was that Freddie Prinze was not Chicano. He just played one on TV. Prinze was actually half Puerto Rican and half Hungarian and referred to himself as a, quote, Hungarican from Washington Heights in New York. And this kind of followed a long history in Hollywood of Latino groups protesting Hollywood's penchant for casting non-Chicanos to play Chicano, Mexican, or Latino parts, including by groups like LULAC, MAPA, MALDEF, and the NCLR. These complaints kind of poured in from across the country from viewers and groups like El Teatro Nacional de Aztlán, which was a Chicano theater group known as Tenaz, or another group called Justice for Chicanos in Motion Picture work, also known as Justicia. They condemned the show's what they thought degrading humor. And they argued that Prinze's Spanish sounded too Puerto Rican, that even his gestures and his body movements were not convincingly Chicano, and that Prinze and even the distinctly Caribbean flavor of the amazing theme song for the show by Puerto Rican singer Jose Feliciano were kind of inauthentic portrayals of East Los Angeles at the time. One letter from the Hispanic Urban Center said the show was, quote, a sad continuation of the racist history of the media that has made us almost invisible. It accused NBC, which is the network the show aired on, of presenting Chico in a kind of demeaning serf master relation to the man, ridiculing his language, his speech, his habits, his overall presence, and it goes on and on. For his part, Freddie Prinze, who was really an amazing actor, rebutted, quote, I wish I knew what they wanted. They say Chicanos talk a certain way, walk a certain way. I know a lot of Chicanos, all different. They don't want an actor. They want a stereotype, a wind-up Chicano. Some argued the show was demeaning, just in its title, Chico, of course, meaning boy in Spanish, juxtaposed to Ed Brown, the older white person, as the man. One of the associate producers, who was a Chicano named Ray Andrade, and the former president of Justicia, and actually the person who was partially based the Chico character on, argued that many of these problems stemmed from not having Chicanos or Latinos involved in the production of the show, especially as writers. This wasn't unique to Chico and the Man. We can talk about Norman Lear's many shows on TV, like All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Good Times, Sanford and Son. Many of these were produced about Latinos and other people of color without Latinos or people of color as writers or producers or certainly directors. The uproar over Chico quieted soon after its debut, but there were advertiser boycotts, there were pickets of KNBC studios in Burbank where it was taped. Now, all this is kind of to say that I think the protest against Chico and the Man was more than just a misrepresentation of Chicanos or their exclusion from the TV industry. It was, I think, a testament to the ongoing civil rights struggles of Chicanos and Latinos during the 1970s, after the heyday of the civil rights movements. So we might read Chico and the Man alongside of a larger matrix of pan-Latino politics of the day, perhaps in conversation with Chicana artists, Linda Lucero's poster of the Puerto Rican nationalist Lolita Lebron, who led the 1954 attack on the House of Representatives in the name of Puerto Rican independence. It is also worth remembering that Los Angeles, where Chico and the Man was taped and set, was home to really serious political collaborations between groups like the Brown Berets, the Black Panthers, and Asian organizations like the predominantly Japanese American East Wind, or that the East Side in LA was home to the biggest civil rights era anti-Vietnam War protest known as the Chicano Moratorium in May of 1970, when 30,000 plus folks rolled through East LA's Laguna Park. Or of course, that the Cuban Revolution inspired thousands of Chicano, Chicana, and Black university and high school students across the country. We might also point out that the Black Panthers supported Chicano high school blowouts and walkouts in LA in 1968. There are all sorts of these interconnections that we see in TV, that we see in music, that we see in art, that were playing out on the ground during the civil rights movement as well. And here's where I'll wrap up with a few final comments. My point in sharing these stories, and I tell you, there are many of them in music and TV and art and film, is that they were part of a larger history that rested on Chicano and Latino connections with other people, places, and struggles. Our history is full of unexpected and amazing moments like Chico and Brown Eyed Soul. Some of these moments, like Phillips Music Company, brought people together in beautiful ways. Others, like the controversy around Chico and the Man, highlight the tensions and remind us that representation still matters, that it's still a struggle. What can we learn from this multiracial Latino history? Are there lessons to be learned from more current cultural expressions like hip hop, the latest pop music, Hollywood blockbusters, or the latest Selena series on Netflix? What do they tell us about the mix of Black, brown, and white in our world today? Do they bring people together or pull them apart? I'd like to think that much of Latino culture and history equips us with the kind of empathy, even an imagination, to engage one another in meaningful ways. Cultural moments like the ones I shared might seem small, but they remind us that we all have connections with one another. If it happens in music and art, it can happen in politics and the rest of life too, no? These stories remind us that ordinary folks do extraordinary things, that even what we do every day, even the little things, can impact history. Chicano and Latino culture brings people, places, and movements together. And I'd like to think we can use it to imagine a better society, build bridges, and remember that Chicano and Latino culture have a long history of doing the same. This is as true for us in 2022 as it was for Lil Julian Herrera, Bill Phillips, El Chicano, Freddie Prinz in the 60s and 70s. Thanks very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Alvarez. You know, I am actually curious from our participants as to what do they think regarding how they think the Hispanic Latino community has brought us together.
I love this question because I'm a history teacher and I'm always thinking about how to infuse Hispanic and Latino music into my history lessons. So there's all sorts of different combinations and ways that we can create conversations between culture and different subject areas. For music teachers, you know, I assume that you can play music and that you can also pair music with other kinds of cultural formats. I mean, I taught a class this morning actually, and I had a song, Viva Tirado, in fact, playing as my students rolled into the lecture hall at UC San Diego and sat down just as a way to kind of set the vibe, number one. I mean, just kind of set a context and a feeling and an affect for the kind of scene that I want them to sort of be in and think about. But then I am really interested in the ways that music and culture more generally connect with politics. And I don't just mean social movements, I mean sort of ideas about how the world works. And so how we can think of music and culture almost as a kind of dress rehearsal or a site of arena of life where some things happen that are really unique and different, but sometimes they also reflect what is happening in the rest of society and the world. And so creating a conversation between music and culture and politics and the world at large, I think is really, really important, because as an historian, one of the things I always come back to is that music and culture is political and that politics is cultural and musical. And there's a conversation between these things that I think if we can turn our students onto, whether they're in K through 12 or whether they're in college or even beyond, if we're all students of one sort or another, there's just all sorts of different combinations. And I think that one of the other questions further down the list suggested a way, I think, to kind of infuse Hispanic and Latino culture into our music classes and our history classes or any class that we teach. And that is using the stuff that our students are into today. I'm writing about and talking about with you today the 60s and 70s in part because that's kind of what I grew up on, right? As a kid of the 70s and 80s, I was watching reruns of Chico and the Man and some of those shows. But my students and my own daughters, I have twin daughters who are 11, they're not watching Chico and the Man. They're not listening to El Chicano. They're into their own scene and they love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I saw the question, about In the Heights. They love sort of their own genres of music. And if we can sort of find ways to think about the cultural and the political in the context of these new kinds of cultural expressions that strike a chord with our students, I think then we're getting closer to bringing them into these sorts of really important conversations.
I would like to ask, what's an apologist? That one, because I'm pretty interested in what that is. What's their job and what they do.
Yeah, that's great. Like I said, my father is an anthropologist, and an anthropologist is somebody who studies humans, that studies culture. You can be a physical anthropologist and you can study lots of things. You can be a cultural anthropologist where you study just sort of human life. My dad, who did this last year, Robert Alvarez, he's also an historian. So an anthropologist is somebody who really just studies culture, that studies the human way of life. And you can study different places, different people, different communities, different histories. And there's a lot of overlap with history too. I think in my own case, I just had to be a little bit different. I didn't want to follow exactly in my dad's footsteps, as some of us kids like to blaze our own trail. So I didn't want to be an anthropologist. I wanted to be an historian, but we still have a lot in common. But great question.
Dr. It was a very good question. Way to go, Juliana. And so, yes, Dr. Alvarez did touch upon his father was here with us last year at the 9th annual Hispanic Latino Studies Virtual Summer Institute. And perhaps if you want to just share a little bit about the legacy that your family comes from.
Sure. So I know you can, find the old recording of last year's Institute and hear my father talking about the first successful desegregation court case in the history of the United States, which was a case called Robert Alvarez versus the Lemon Grove School Board. Robert Alvarez Sr. Was my grandfather, my dad's dad. And when he was 12 years old, he was the plaintiff in a case to fight the segregation of Mexican and Mexican-American kids in a little town called Lemon Grove, California, just southeast of San Diego in 1931. The families and the neighborhoods of the Mexican children came together and fought the segregation, and they won their court case, and they were not segregated from the white children in Lemon Grove School. And this was 23 years before the famous Brown versus Board of Education case that desegregated schools across the country. And my family kind of grew up with this story, with the Lemon Grove incident and its history as kind of part of our family lore. And my dad was really one of the first people, the first scholars or thinkers or academic types to kind of learn and share this history. And so it really is an important part of my family's history. It's an important part of San Diego history. It's an important part of Latino history. And just one little snippet, about a month ago, we had a big gathering outside in downtown Lemon Grove, which isn't that big, in part because there was the unveiling of a brand new mural, a very big mural on the side of an art store that celebrated the history of the Lemon Grove victory in the school case. So this is really an important historical moment. And I have to say, growing up with that kind of history in my family and being aware of it as I got older is one of the reasons why I decided to become an historian myself, because I knew that there are other stories out there that need telling, that are left out of the history books. And that part of our job, whether we're an historian or an anthropologist or a music teacher, is really to sort of help find the voices and the experiences and the stories of our people, our history, our communities that have been ignored or obscured or overlooked in some way, and kind of share them and help rewrite the history books, so to speak.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. I think what was also fascinating about your father was on how he stumbled across it by accident and doing his own research with regard to the Lemon Grove incident, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's partly how doing history happens. Sometimes you find things by accident. I had no idea who Bill Phillips was. I had no idea who Freddie Prinze was, when I was growing up. But when I sort of thought about it and discovered these stories that they hadn't really been told in the way that I thought they should, they kind of opened up a vantage point, a perspective onto history that sort of changed the way I thought about history. And for me, much like for my dad with Lemon Grove, I began to realize that I couldn't tell the history of Latinos or Mexican American people or communities without accounting for the ways that they engaged and intersected and got along or didn't get along with African Americans and Jewish Americans and so many others, because that was a really important fundamental part of their history, of our history. And for me, sort of finding these stories by accident sort of opened my eyes up to a sort of different kind of history that I had never been taught or learned about in the books that I read, or certainly the classes that I took. So I think that in our own way, we're kind of all historians, and that when we find these stories and these experiences by accident, it's really important for us to remember them and to pass them down in the ways that we can.
And then we've got some time for this last question here. What are your thoughts on the show Gentfield? In the movies like In the Heights, audiences are never happy, it seems, saying media feeds into the stereotypes. The stereotypes come from somewhere, though. To some extent, they do reflect us. Should we be offended or acknowledge them and move on, knowing we are different?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that I'm a season behind on Hentified. I watched season 1. I haven't watched season 2 yet. I loved season 1. I hope season 2 is as good. It's in my queue on Netflix. I think it's really a great question, in part because if you juxtapose all of these more recent kind of shows and films and cultural productions, if we can call them that, there are a lot of them. And think back to the story I told about Chico and the Man. Freddie Prinze playing Chico was the first, or one of the very first, Chicano characters on television. And this was just in the mid-1970s. There had been nobody before that. And so here we are 50 years later, and we've got these dozens and dozens of really remarkable shows and films and plays. And so I think that there has to be some argument for just the kind of quantity being a kind of progress. Yet at the same time, as this question I think really astutely points out, is that a lot of people got a lot of problems with a lot of these shows and films because of representation. I mean, within the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda got sort of dinged for not having enough Afro-Latino or Latina representation, and sort of vowed in interviews after the fact to increase it for his next productions. And so there's always going to be, I think, questions we can raise of how we are represented, of how we are seen in sort of popular culture and media. At the same time, I think it's really important to recognize that we are in that sphere, we are in that arena in ways that Chicanos and Latinos haven't been historically, and that creating that space and actually just having the conversation of what's right and what's wrong is really almost progress in and of itself, because in years past, those doors were closed. Those opportunities weren't there. And so I think, it's really a mix of both kinds of points of view that this really smart question raises. And I appreciate it very much. Thanks.
And we appreciate you. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. What a rich, rich presentation. And we could continue and engage in this presentation and the topics that you were able to share with us today, but we are out of time now and we have to segue into our next amazing presenter, pero te lo agradezco mucho. Thank you so much for being here. And please send your dad, to let him know that we say hello and that we also appreciate him too for everything that he and his family have done to make such an incredible impact in our educational system, as you are continuing to do as well. Gracias.
Thank you all. Gracias.
And so now we're going to segue into a lovely, lovely friend of mine and just amazing, amazing person. This is Nuri Castillo Crawford, the CEO, founder of 1010 Publishing and a published author. She was born in Peru, South America, and immigrated to the United States when she was just 10 years old. She attended Florida A&M University, where she attained both her bachelor's and her master's degree. Her publishing house, 1010 Publishing, specializes in disseminating literary creations in a bilingual format. And as the CEO founder of 1010 Publishing, she connects diverse writers with readers of all backgrounds. And she knows the importance of representation and equity in all resources for all. And Nuri is currently a director of academic support for the Gwinnett County Public Schools, where she has broken ground by implementing a Hispanic mentoring program, the first of its kind in the school district. And in this role, her focus is to support Hispanic Latino students, build background knowledge, self-esteem, and ultimately help them graduate from high school with a post-K-12 career and college option. Nuri has won multiple awards, including the 50 most influential Latinos and Latinas in Georgia 3 consecutive years, and has been a guest in various media platforms such as NBC, ABC, Univision, Telemundo, Mundo Hispánico, Latina Magazine, and many, many more. Help me welcome Nuri Castillo Crawford. Bienvenida, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Buenas tardes, gracias. Es un placer estar aquí. Thanks for having me, everyone. I want to tell you a little bit about my personal journey. Like Patty was saying, I was originally born in Peru, South America. And when I was about 10 and a half years old, my parents decided that we're moving to the US. And like most kids, you're excited at first until you realize, I don't know anybody there and I don't know English. So that becomes a little bit of a worry. My parents are both from Peru as well. And so I was very much, very connected to my country, my family. My mother is one of 11, my father one of 13. So we had a lot of family there. I was never lonely or scared by myself or sad. Very much, within my whole family, just been very connected. And that literally is one of the special things that we have in the Latino community. We're very relationship type people, and we're very connected to our families. So I moved here, and so a lot of different things occurred within my time from arriving in the US to the time I was definitely an adult. I 100% decided that as I grew up and I became an educator, that the diversity in literature and the stories written, as our last guest was sharing, was not evident. And we definitely needed to change that, because as an educator, I knew the power of representation and having resources such as those that are so important for children. And not to say that that's the only things, for example, that Latino kids should read is Latino authors or Latino stories, but it has to be part of what they're exposed to, because seeing yourself in a positive light and positive representation can help you build self-esteem. And everyone of us probably knows that, you know, having a positive self-esteem and believing in yourself, believing you're worthy, and you are seen and heard and respected is so important for all of us. So imagine the impact that that has for children alone. So when we're talking about contributions, and I started thinking about what are the things that I am very proud about for being a good role model and or mentor in my lifetime, is being an educator, being an entrepreneur, and now recently being a leader in the nonprofit world. And I sincerely feel like, again, part of my culture and part of me my belief system is that my life is worth so much more when I'm able to give back, when I'm able to be a servant leader in my community. And that, I think, is one of those variables that sometimes others might not know, but in the Latino culture, for the most part, we're raised that way. We're raised as not being, you know, you could have a family member that perhaps, you know, is struggling, maybe emotionally, maybe financially, etc. And even as I grow, I think about me growing up, or even as an adult, even through all their faults, all I remember is my family, even if they were upset at them or anything, is like, how do we help them? How do we give back? And don't forget your, you know, tu tío or whatever, like, don't forget so-and-so. So even though, you know, we might not have been happy about someone, we always think about how do we still help them? And I sincerely believe that that is definitely a trait for the Latino community. And I'm just sharing that because sometimes I think people don't understand that or might not know about our culture. And I think that's such an important variable when we're talking about leadership, when we're talking about building relationships and being inclusive. So a little bit about being an educator. I started as a teacher, then, you know, 5 years or so later, became a school administrator. So I was in school administration. And then the Gwinnett County Public School System is the largest school system in Georgia. It's the 13th largest in the country. And I was the first Latina, with the highest district level position as well. When I got to my position, I launched the first district-wide mentoring program for Latino students because data told me we needed that. So it wasn't, of course, I love my community and myself, but it was because data told me that the graduation rate reflected an extra arm or an extra layer of support. And it, as alongside that, not only the graduation rate, but the dropout rate was the highest. And so working with the rest of my district's leaders, came up with my strategic plan and decided what variables were the most important, is the ones that we could actually somehow impact, because, you know, as educators, we can't always impact everything, but the things that we could, we decided to incorporate into the program. And this is, you know, my heart here as well. I became an entrepreneur and decided to launch 1010 Publishing because at one point, and there's danger in allowing one version of a story to be told, especially when the storyteller might not really know the real story. So a few years ago, when I felt that the journey of an immigrant was not relevant and not mirroring my personal experiences, I thought, I'm going to write a book about what my experience as an immigrant was. And the most fascinating thing about Latinos is that we are so diverse. So not only in nationality, but we're also so diverse in race. We have Latinos that are Asian descent. We have Latinos that are descendants of indigenous line. We have Afro-Latinos, we have white Latinos, and then we have lots of Latinos that are, you know, a little bit of all of that. And I definitely fall into that category. And so for me, it was, you know, and then also our immigration journey. You know, if you talk to people out in the West, you know, there are 5 generations, and some people have been here, their families have been on US soil forever, because 1/3 of the United States belonged to Mexico at one point. And so some people didn't immigrate here. They're Latino or Hispanic background, but they've been here forever because the land used to be part of Mexico. And then you have some states like in Georgia, where the majority of our community, my community of Latino Hispanic community, is 1st and 2nd generation. I am a 1st generation. Like I said, I came when I was 10 and a half. And many friends and colleagues that I do have within the district are 1st generation. And we will find some 2nd, because of course the kids, etc. But the majority of the adults are 1st generation. And so as I started writing my book and started communicating with a couple of publishing houses, because it's not that easy, especially if you've never written a book and nobody cares that, you know, you're passionate about it. They just, you know, they're going to know like what kind of investment can I make? And so when I first started that journey, I started realizing, so it's not just, you know, that the representation in the books, which is about 6% now or around there, was a lot less when I first started writing. So it's not just that the minimal representation in the characters, but the writers, you know, the percentage rate of the writers is very low, especially in large publishing houses. And then the editors, and then the leaders or the CEOs, those people that make decisions about who gets their book published. And so I thought about it, and I got to work and decided that I would launch my own small press, hire my team. So I had a lot of fun getting to know people like editors and illustrators and graphic designers, translators, etc., and decided to launch 1010 Publishing. And so every book that we release is bilingual in some way. So it's either in a bilingual in one book. So we'll have English and Spanish in one book, or we'll have 2 versions of the book. And I will add that we started with English and Spanish, and we are always going to add more titles in English and Spanish, but we also have Vietnamese, Korean, traditional Chinese. And this year we'll be releasing a book in French and English. So we want to be able to help, you know, our kids are growing up in a global society. You know, it's not like when I was young. And so I want books to represent our global society so that every one of our kids can see themselves in the stories and the narratives and the characters, and even in the authors themselves. And I think that's very powerful. And literally, I feel like we're going in the right direction. Like I said, the percentages of the books with representation has grown in recent years. So I'm very optimistic about seeing this grow even further. My latest venture is launching a nonprofit. And so I started with a space that's in the middle of the Latino community, right outside Atlanta. It's a mall. It's literally, when you go, you feel like you're in South America. I love it. That's how I started going, because of the food. But spoke to the owner, and he allowed me to have a really nice size space to do a free library. So we got computers. Comcast gave us a grant. We have computers, Wi-Fi, and then we have these shelves filled with books that people donate. We go through all of them. They have to look great. Nobody likes to open a book with ripped pages, etc. So a lot of respect for the books and for the people that come. And then after lots of conversations, in thinking about how much or how important it is that literacy and graduation rates go hand in hand, decided to open a small bookstore. And the amazing thing about it is, you know, sometimes it takes one person to start something that will be great. And in this case, you know, I started posting on social media that I wanted to open this little bookstore in the community. You know, some moms came forward and I needed a little table to showcase a book. And, you know, I found a little table. You know, the lady that I clean her house, she's got a little table in her garage and she's given it to me. I'll paint it white for you. Then I had other friends who were like, you want cake stands to showcase your books? They're $40 each, but I bought you 4 of them. So everybody, I feel like, supported the little store, the little bookstore, in the way that they could, and helping, you know, people feel empowered by having some skin in the game. Like, you don't have to do or feel compelled or pressured to do something that you can't do, but everybody can do something to support the community. And so I feel like that has been a great success in itself. And we haven't been even opened a whole month, but we literally are on our way, and we're having monthly read aloud with an activity. And last night we just we scheduled Latino leaders. We have a couple of state representatives that are going to be reading, the first Latina state magistrate judge. She's going to be reading. We have a couple business owners. So we have a school board member. So we're going to have leaders take time out of their day to come and read a book. We'll do the activity that's aligned to the book. And then hopefully we'll be able to help our families see the power and basically seeing where there's access, whether you want to buy a book or you just need your kids to have access to books. So it'll be two spaces. They're not next to each other, they're far. We don't want to confuse people. But it's been a great initiative, and I'm hoping that it will be a great success for the community, and we can help the community see, you know, how important it really is to have books on hand for the kids. Here we go. I thought I'd share, you know, so I can tell you all day long how important it is for kids. But kids write me. I have like, oh my goodness, probably like 3 boxes, probably 2 for sure. These are some letters I literally just got a couple of weeks ago. And after reading my first book, which is 3,585 Miles to Be an American Girl, it's part of the Sophia series. And my second book is called Sophie and Bibi, Big Sister. Both of the books tell the story of this little girl named Sophia, who is an immigrant to this country. You know, writers write about what they know. So it was about me. And the first story is, sincerely, it's a story that it's very relevant to all children. So I love it because children who are Latino might be able to find a connection with the story, because Sophia talks about from beginning to end how much she loves her family and how worried she is about her mom, because, you know, her mom's sad and is missing her family in Peru, and how worried she is about her dad, because her dad is working like night and day. Like, when she wakes up in the morning, he's already gone. And at night, when she's asleep, she tries to stay up so that when he comes in to kiss her goodnight, she'll be able to see him. And so it's a sweet story about her challenges The very first book is mostly about that, but how much at the end she talks, she says she's so proud of being, a Latina, and now she's American, and how she's proud to speak English and Spanish and so forth. Sophia and Vivi, Big Sister, is the second book, and this book is more about, it's a compare and contrast book. So Sophia goes on this journey of comparing and contrasting what things are native or natural way of life in Peru versus what she's finding to be the everyday life in the United States of America. And before she gets started with the difference of getting to school, getting on the yellow bus versus in Peru, which you'd have to get on a city bus that's crowded and people are hanging out. She talks a little bit about Peru and how Peru is known to be one of the 7 wonders of the world, how there's more than 4,000 different types of potatoes in Peru, because potatoes are native to Peru, and how Machu Picchu is one of the most visited destinations in the entire planet. So she talks a little bit about Peru so that the reader gets to know a little bit of inside of Latin America in this country of Peru. And then she goes into the differences, right? And talking a little bit about how she gets to school, the expectations. She talks about things that are different and things that are still the same. And one of the things that she noticed, she shares in the book, is one thing is that's for sure still the same, is that her parents and just love her, like her family love each other no matter what. So whether you're in Peru or the USA, your family just loves you. And so definitely it's a very relatable book. And Sophia, when she comes to this country, comes on an airplane, because a lot of our little brothers and our big brothers and sisters come across the border through Mexico, but some don't, and again, Latino community is so complex and so varied and diverse. And that's definitely something that we should all know. Everybody doesn't migrate or emigrate to this country the same way, because I flew in an airplane, a Delta flight, with my sister and my baby brother, who was 3 months old, and my mother and father. So anyway, here's a little story. These are 3 of many, many, many letters I get. And but I love these. These are recent. It says, I am smart, even though I don't yet know English. Soy inteligente, aunque todavía no sepa inglés. Thank you for talking to my class. I love your stars, and I love how you never give up. I thought that was cute. And I do get that a lot. That's one of the feedbacks that I really do get a lot of, is like, I'm glad, or like, I'm glad that you don't give up. Like, I'm just happy. And this one says, I was an immigrant too, because I think it's Watanda. I came from Watanda and I moved to the US because there was not a lot of money there and food. So, the story is not always about, like I said, it's not always about Latino immigrants either. Other children from other countries can relate because they too go through a challenging time, and they find connections in the stories. And I love it when children who are not immigrant, who are not Latino, find connections and tell me things like, I know what Sophia was feeling, because in 2nd grade we moved and I had to go to a new school and I didn't know anybody either. So it's amazing when we can help our kids find connections within our diverse communities. So not only do the children who are represented through the characters or the author of the story feel connections, but then we can help our other children garnish empathy and find similar connections and ways to connect with one another. And it's so important because, like I said, we are living in a global society, and our kids need to feel empowered of making connections and finding things that we have in common. So I think it's a great literature, books, it's a great way to help our kids stay connected, build positive relationships, and find empathy towards one another. And in this world, we know that kindness is going to go a long way.
It sure is. Nuri, thank you so much for sharing that. You're exactly right. The Hispanic Latino culture, it is very complex, it is varied, and it is diverse. And so the connections are certainly very important so our kids can feel a sense of belonging and feel empowered. And we're going to talk more about that. In fact, I believe that you actually have a connection with this next presenter as well. And we have the lovely Leticia Ordaz with us. She is the founder of Celito Lindo Books, a bilingual publishing house, and award-winning children's book author at the International Latino Book Awards. She is also an Emmy-nominated anchor reporter in Sacramento, California. She is the author of several books to include That Girl on TV Could Be Me, which I wonder who that could be about, which is about a journey of a Latina news anchor. She is also a literacy ambassador, sharing bilingual stories with children around the world. Leticia hopes to break barriers and change statistics that currently show only 7% of children's books feature Latinx characters or subjects, and there are only 10% Latinx authors and illustrators in the United States. So help me welcome Leticia Ordenas. ¿Cómo estás?
Patricia, amiga, so good to be here and so great to hear everyone's amazing stories. You're all leaders and inspiring our children to shoot for the stars. For me, it's so special to be a Latina leader in my community, and I'm a literacy ambassador around the world. Not only am I a television news anchor, but now an award-winning author. I get to take my stories to children around the country, and I really hope to inspire more students to write their own stories. And my journey to become an author all started because when I was a little girl, I would go to the library and I wouldn't see anyone on the pages of a book that looked like me. And it did affect my self-esteem not to see representation on the pages of a book. And so I knew I wanted to do something with that, but it wasn't until I became a mother that I really knew that I had to take what I had and just write stories for the world to read. So now I've written 4 bilingual books. Like Nuri, bilingual is my passion. I think it's so important for all children to know multiple languages in the society that we're living in. You know, in other countries, it's very common to speak 4 or 5 languages. So why in America are children often told to only speak 1 language? So we are global kids of this world. And I just love that I get to share my story with so many. And the books that I've written, The Adventures of Mr. Macaw, is actually, it won 4 international awards. And more than the awards is taking these stories into schools and for children to say, hey, those kids on the pages of a book, they look like me. And it really does a lot for their self-esteem. And similar to Nuri, the reason I became my own children's book publisher is when I wrote this amazing story, The Adventures of Mr. Macaw, based on an adventure that I had with my family with a kite that my children consider magical. I thought it was going to be an instant hit with publishers and everyone was going to want it. And a big publisher did want the story, but they told me they didn't see the need for it to be in 2 languages because they made the comment that Latinos don't read. And I was very upset by that comment. And I just decided to call off the deal. I decided that I wasn't going to work with someone who would make such a comment like that. So it empowered me to start my own bilingual publishing house. And my company has been such a huge success now, and the books have been so successful that this company that denied the book because they didn't want it to be in Spanish has now come back and asked to license my book so they can carry it as well. So it's just come full circle where we get to show people that our voices matter. And these are stories that I think sometimes people make the mistake saying, I shouldn't buy that book or I shouldn't pick up that book at the bookstore because I don't speak Spanish. Well, that's not what it's about. These books are for all children. And I've been taking them to schools around the country and children are connecting with them. All children are connecting with them. So the point of the books is to amplify the voices of Latino children. You know, 1 in 4 children in our country right now are Latino. So it benefits all of us to empower children to see themselves in a positive light because we want all children to have the same opportunities. We want all children to shoot for the stars and to know that they can go to college too. and teachers. You are wonderful educators, and you do so much for our kids. So I just beg you to bring books like this into your classroom, because it does so much for children. When I've read this to schools virtually, one session had 200 schools in Nevada. Children were in tears. Children were in tears because they really felt connected to the story. And they said, one little girl raised her hand and said, now I know that I matter, that it's okay to be brown. And that really meant a lot to me, that, you know, children are finding their voice and finding that they too are important. You know, only 7% of children in characters in books are Latino. That's a really low number, and it's not representative. So when children open up these books in the classroom, they're going to see their neighbors in a positive light. They're going to learn more about their neighbors' cultures. And I just think it benefits everyone for us to seek these books. It empowers kids to know that they are smart, that they matter, and that we care about them. And here I am. Never would I imagine that I would be in the presence of Edward James Olmos with my books, the International Latino Awards. I've won 7 now, and that's just really sending a strong message to the publishers that right now are making a transformation. They're trying hard to be more diverse. Still, a lot of work needs to be done, but us small publishing houses are showing them the way. And so that feels pretty good to be, you know, a grassroots effort and to be making a difference in our community. And we've garnered even the attention of the Duchess Fergie. I found out that she enjoyed my book so much that she did a virtual reading for all of her fans. So even royalty reading these diverse books. And she was really tickled that it was also in Spanish. And in fact, she read some of the book in Espanol because she too knows multiple languages. So it's definitely something for us to embrace. And just a little bit more about myself. I am an immigrant to this country. My family is from Mexico. When my parents came here, they were farm workers. They never asked for anything in return. They just wanted to come here to seek the American dream for themselves and for their children, and they have achieved it. They now own their own house because of their hard work. They have a huge savings. Even though they started making, you know, minimum wage when they were here, they were really good at saving money and encouraging us to go to college, something they never had the opportunity to do because they had to support their large families. My dad, 14 brothers and sisters that his family had to support. He talks about the whole family having just one chicken to eat for dinner and all of them just trying to grab a piece. My mother, she grew up with 12 brothers and sisters, very big families. I have one brother and one sister. And yes, a first generation college student that I am. And so it's really my passion to go out and talk to other youth and say, you know what, you can do it too. Even though my parents never went to college, they always knew that I had the potential, and that's what they always wanted for me. So even from the time that I was 5 years old, I remembered them saying the word college, even though they probably truly didn't understand what that meant because they never went to college, but they knew that that was going to be a road to a better future for their family. And the people that you see here on the screen, the little guys here, I'm a mother of 2 young boys, and they really inspire me every single day to keep on writing and to keep on telling those diverse stories for us to read. I'm very proud to be a Latina entrepreneur. And more than being on the anchor desk, I feel like I'm a voice for my community, and that's what I'm told. You know, I want to give our community a voice. There's so many underrepresented groups, and children need a voice too. So we all need to be advocates for our kids at school, and just a proud moment to be the first in my family to go to college. And after that, I really changed the trajectory of my family because I've had cousins and, you know, and my siblings come back and say, because you walked that stage, I knew that I could too. So it's really transformational when we all invest in a child's future because it just continues to have a roller coaster effect. More people continue to succeed by seeing those positive examples. And this is the inside page of one of my books. I wrote a children's autobiography. I teamed up with the publisher in San Francisco who heard about me and asked me to write my own children's book story because he thought my personal story of immigration and being the first in my family to go to college would inspire people. And a lot of people are surprised to learn that I was that shy girl in class. And it was because of a teacher, a very special teacher, Mr. Heinrich. he got me out of my shell. And I think I am where I am today as far as being in the broadcasting world and being a voice for my community, because he believed in me and he made sure that I knew that every single day. I remember in 6th grade, he would call on me to read, and I did not like to read out loud. I was nervous and terrified, but day after day, he didn't stop calling on me. And so I would go home and practice for not 15 minutes, for 2 hours every day, just to get better. And I still remember some of my classmates, when I spoke so quietly, would say, "Speak up, Leticia, we can't hear you." And so, yes, my voice started getting louder and louder, and I started getting more confident as I started practicing at home. And now I take this book to students, and I always love reaching the shy ones. And we all say, "You can do it. I can do it." And just the light in their eyes when they say that, they start to believe it. And I always tell them, "You will read loud and proud." And these are words that stick to kids. My own children had a virtual performance, and they were very nervous to perform in the school's first spring concert. And I remembered my son on the drive to school saying to himself, "I'm going to sing loud and proud, just like you, mommy. I'm going to do it loud and proud." So that's what I hope to encourage our youth, is just to get out of their shell and to thank those special educators who see what we have inside of us. You know, we all have potential. And sometimes it takes you, the teachers, to tell us that. Parents could tell their children that they are smart all they want, but when it comes from a teacher, it's something that kids never forget. So please keep encouraging your students that they all matter, that they're all important. And for me, school partnerships have been a dream come true. I love going to schools, whether it's virtual or in person. For children to have my books in their hands, it's just such a gift. You know, they get to learn about STEM and space through this book that you see here. And then you have kids that line up and talk about what they're going to create. And so I always ask kids at the end of this story, the Carousel King and the Space Mission, what will you create? And they have so many amazing ideas, portals that they're going to build, robots that they're going to build, levitating items that they're going to create. And so kids are just so full of imagination, and with a little encouragement, they're all going to succeed. But it just takes all of us wrapping our arms around them and letting them know that they have what it takes. So it is just so passionate for me just to go out to schools and to reach these kids, especially the shy ones. And so, yes, books in the classroom matter. I hear this every day from the letters that children are writing me, that it's been transformational for them to see themselves in these books. And kids that didn't want to pick up a book before, you know, that their teachers were like, "I don't know what I can do. You know, Johnny isn't reading at grade level." But when you introduce them to a book that they love, so many schools have been so generous where they've bought a book for the entire school, every single child getting to walk away with a book. And many are saying this is the first book they've ever owned. So books are special. Let's try to bring those into the classroom, because these kids are coming back and they're telling their teachers that they're sleeping with their books. They don't want to let them go. Their parents are finding the nightlight on and the kids are reading late at night. So just something is switching in them. They all have the potential to be readers, but you have to expose them to books that are relatable to them. So that is definitely key. Just an example of that, I recently did a Cesar Chavez event, and I was the featured author, and I did story time with the adventures of Mr. Macaw, and every child was going to get a signed book. Well, at the same time, the Rotary Club was there giving away books, but their books were not culturally relevant. And so I had about 300 kids in my line waiting to get a book, while nobody was picking up the stack of books from the Rotary Club. So it just goes to show that it's important what kind of books that you bring to your kids, and just make sure that you diversify your classroom, because all kids are looking to see their neighbors, themselves in a book. Let's keep that in mind, because that's how we're all going to have super readers in our classroom. And when literacy sparks, that means kids are not going to be dropping out of school. They're going to be thinking about college early on. And it's just going to be a win-win situation for all of us. So imagine the investment, spending $10 on a book for a student, and then finding out that they now love to read. You know, that's priceless. And so, yes, going out to the classrooms and seeing those smiles and for them to see the positive examples. You know, I don't charge to do my presentations for schools. You know, I like to go for free because I want everyone to have that access to hear from leaders in the community that look like them, that look like the children that are in that school. And so this little girl, she spoke up during a Zoom session and said, you know, your book made me feel really important because the characters look like me. And we were both just bawling when she said that. So, you know, books are very important. You know, it's the first form of media that children will see. So I just ask that all of you work hard to add those diverse titles to your classroom and to bring in those role models, because I tell schools, like, I want to form a partnership with you. I'm not there to read to your children one time and walk away. And schools have taken me up on that offer, you know, where, you know, I am there through the whole year. You know, if it's career day, I'll go to the school and talk to kids about my career in the news, my career as an entrepreneur. So I think it's just finding those relatable people that you can bring into your school. Growing up, I didn't have anyone who looked like me, who was going onto my campus and telling me that I could go to college and that I could succeed. So those community partnerships are going to be key because, you know, there's so much for us to do, and teachers can't do everything on their own. And, you know, a lot of community partners will want to be invited to your campus because they're all passionate about helping children in the community succeed. And this is one of the inside pages of my latest book, The Carousel King and the Space Mission. And it's one of my favorite things to do is to go into those schools and to have students say these words of affirmation. And, you know, they have 200 kids screaming, I am smart. I believe in myself. Soy valiente. I am brave. I can do it. Puedo hacerlo. These are words that kids are remembering and saying to themselves over and over again. And, you know, they're believing it. And this is empowering them to want to do more with their lives and to know when they look in the mirror that they matter. So this is so important for all of us to continue as teachers to remind our students, you know, all that they are. Some of them don't have positive examples at home. So we at school need to provide that nurturing environment for our students, all students. And here I am with my book, That Girl on TV Could Be Me. And this is an international award-winning book as well. And I was blown away when it won the best children's picture book of the year, you know, for the Bank School of Education. So that was pretty cool for me to see that this book is touching so many lives, and that, you know, you don't necessarily have to want to be on the news to connect with this book. I was that little girl who wanted to be on the news since I was 5 years old, but I didn't see anyone who looked like me. And so it just goes to show kids that whether you want to be an astronaut, an engineer, anything that you want to do, if you don't see those examples, you can still be that person and pave the way for the next generation. So I recently went to a high school and, you know, found out the children's books are not just for little kids. You know, the books say, what's the age group of that book? And it says 4 to 8 years old. Well, high school students who want to become authors asked me to read the entire book to them. I was there going to give them a presentation and some highlights of the book, but they sat through story time and they too were in tears at the end of the story, and very motivated by the story of someone who looked like them. And then at the end of the story, I started hearing from some of the kids that they too want to be authors, and they shared the story ideas that they have for a book. And so it's also cultivating the next generation of authors. So I thought that was really cool. And a lot of the students were in a writing contest and had written the story in English. And their teacher later wrote me an email saying that all the students asked for more time because they're now going to translate their stories so their stories can impact and have a greater reach, reaching the Latino audience. So I thought that was really cool that they too are now making their stories bilingual, all because they heard a conversation with me. And it just shows the power of, you know, including our children and giving them those positive examples. And they had said I was the first speaker that they had ever heard from that was Latino. So they all thought that was pretty cool. And I won't be the last Latino to set foot on that campus. I'm sure of that now. And so this is the last page of that book, That Girl on TV Could Be Me. And I always tell kids, you know, that it doesn't matter the color of your or where you come from, you're going to face hardships, but you have to believe in yourself. And teachers, you help your kids believe in themselves and just give them that daily affirmation that they matter. I still remember that teacher, Mr. Heinrich, that told me that I belonged in the GATE program because I was doing really well in school. So he really changed my life and you know, helped me believe that I was smart. And it was just transformational when we invest in our kids. All of our kids are smart. It's just not, oh, some kids are smart, some kids aren't. If you invest in a child, you're going to get the same results, and that is success. So let's keep working hard to not exclude anyone because we're going to make an assumption about them because they come from a certain background, or you know, their parents never went to college, or they grew up in a rough neighborhood. Let's put all those stereotypes aside and treat every child as a success story, because when you give students that confidence and you believe in them and you give them that work, every child is capable of learning, but don't put them into the back of the room. Everyone has the possibility to succeed, and they will succeed. So the influence of a good teacher can never be erased. And to this day, my heart is with Mr. Heinrich, who believed in me. And, you know, I feel really bad to find out that he passed away and I was never able to share the story, That Girl on TV Could Be Me, where he is a character in my book. So I'm still working to contact someone in his family because I heard that they moved to Idaho. So I'm doing everything in my power to deliver a copy of my books to his family, just so they know what kind of an impact a good teacher can have on a life. And I know that all of you are making a difference, and just keep that in mind every day when you go to work, because I know it's not an easy job, but what you are doing is changing lives. Look at all of these wonderful smiles. I just skipped that page, but a lot of students out there want books, they want to be readers, and we all have the power to make that happen. So let's just keep believing in our children, bring them those diverse people into their lives that you can partner with and show them that they matter. And again, it's all a team effort. We're all in this together. You are not alone in this journey. Working together, all of our youth can succeed. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, gracias, Leti says, that's exactly right. All of our youth can succeed. And a lot of what you were sharing certainly resonated with me, even with my own daughters. I have two, and one in particular really wants to see books that reflect, that look like her. And both of my daughters are half Puerto Rican and half Mexican. So just recently, one of them wanted to choose a book that had Puerto Rican representation because, you know, yo soy mexicana, and typically I just naturally go to the books that have characters that are Mexican. And so she was like, Mommy, but I want one with a Puerto Rican. And so she did pick up a book, and she found Sonia Sotomayor and enjoyed it. And so you're right, they really do want to see themselves in what they are learning in the classroom. And so we're going to give the audience a chance to share their thoughts, their questions, and their reflections on both the presentations that we had today from Nudi Crawford and also you, Leticia. So Molly, you want to go ahead and transition into that for us at this time?
Yes, so you should be able to see in the chat there, I put a link to this exchange, so you can either access it there or by using the camera on your phone and scanning that QR code. So just respond to this question. What are your questions or reflections in response to the two great presentations we just heard? Such rich conversations, and I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts that can be shared. So really encourage all of you to share a thought, a reflection, a question, and then to rate the thoughts of others after you've done that, and then we can move into a Q&A. So go ahead and get started on that.
Okay, let's see what we've got. First question, and we'll just start with Nudi. Thank you for sharing your story and for raising our awareness of the importance of having books with characters that Latinos can relate to. And just in thinking about that question, Nudi, who would you say is that one character that you relate to? And you can't pick yourself because I know you've got characters that reflect you. So, but what other character out there in a book would you say that you relate to?
You know, because while I was in high school and even in college, I literally didn't know about any books that represented or relevant to my age group at the time. So I really, because of the context, Maya Angelou has definitely been one of those very impactful writers. Now, you know, we have Leticia, Sonia Sotomayor, we have other writers that I love, and I get like really, I'm very connected and emotional about seeing their stories, helping cheer them on, being so proud of the work that they're doing. But so yeah, I definitely didn't have the benefit of having books that reflected my journey or story. And so I would say that some of the authors that I probably, because of the hardship, because of the lack of self-esteem that some of her writing talks about, empowerment and loving yourself, etc., elevating and not allowing people to define you. Those sentiments were very relatable to me. So I definitely appreciated her voice.
What do you think the future holds for bilingual authorship and translations?
Well, I think the sky's the limit. I think that publishers are seeing that people do want bilingual books, and because of these indie publishers that are showing the way and winning these big awards. I mean, for the International Latino Awards, we were up against, really big publishers, the top 5. And for us indie publishers to be winning with our bilingual books, our audience, our population is sending a message loud and clear that we are buying these books. We want these books. Schools are getting grants for these books. So, but you can't just jump on the bandwagon as a publisher. Big publishers have to be very responsible. Don't just translate a book that's not culturally relevant and have an author who isn't, of Latinx descent and just call it a bilingual book and think you're going to sell it. Kids relate to books that are relatable to them. And if the culture is missing, the kids are going to know about it. The families are going to know about it. So I would just ask that publishers be responsible when they do this and to find those diverse authors. There shouldn't just be 10% Latino authors in the country. We all have a story to tell. We're all writers and creators. So why is only a 10% of the Latinx population being published? If you're going to publish a bilingual book, find a Latino author. Those are my thoughts.
Oh, I love that. You're exactly right. They're going to call you out on it. Just like I was saying, my daughter called me out on it. She's like, no, pero mami, ¿dónde están los puertorriqueños? Where's the Puerto Ricans, right? So no, you're exactly right. Thank you for that. Let's see the next question here. Was it difficult to find publishing companies for Latino stories and why? So I know Leticia, you did hint to that earlier today in your presentation, and I want to learn more and hear more about that. But Nudi, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think that the reason that it was a challenge, I would totally agree with Leticia, was that, one of the things that I've actually heard this, which I'm not proud of having heard this. I wish I could like wash my ears and never hear it again. But I've heard actually someone say like, oh, I just happen to be in the room, they don't have any books. So I think that because publishers obviously are a business, they're not going to buy the books. So we're not going to waste money, time, effort, research, etc. and having this and surprise, people buy books. I mean, I sold 10,000 copies to a school district at a time, 1,000 copies. The schools want books. And so for me, I think it's been a rude awakening for some large publishing houses and realizing like, oh, there is an interest and people are trying, because having a Latino, being Latino doesn't just mean the language, culture, the music, the traditions, the faith, the food. So I think if you're going to have authentic stories that reflect the community, you have to have people that know the community, and who better than ourselves. So, but I think that definitely has been, and historically, the reason why they didn't think that there was going to be an audience for it. But I feel like the shift has changed, and it's changing, and we definitely have a lot more work to do there. I mean, the percentage rates are still very, very small, but I feel like we're an upward trend. And so with the support of readers and writers, I know that we're going to see the impact that we need to see.
And then Leticia, I know that you alluded to this a little bit earlier with regard to this big company. Do you want to elaborate a little bit further? Not necessarily mentioning the name, but just the experience.
Yeah, the experience from them was that, why should I make this book in Spanish? Their thing was they had the audacity to say Latinos don't read. They're, ill-informed. That is not the case. Maybe they don't sell Spanish titles because the books that they're choosing aren't relevant to our community. So yes, I've heard from other indie authors who say, I made my book in Spanish, but people aren't buying it. But then again, they are not Latino. So how can you write about an experience that you know nothing about firsthand? It's not going to come off as relatable to the people who are reading it. So publishing houses, if they want that authentic voice, need to go seek those authentic authors. And, I've had huge success, just like Nuri. I mean, I've had Hollywood send me emails saying, write the sequel to Mr. Macaw. This could possibly be a movie. We want this to be something like Coco. This could be an animation. They've even thrown celebrities' names out there of artists who could possibly play the characters in my book. So there is hunger for our books right now. And this is not just going to be a trend that's right now. This is going to just explode. So get on the bandwagon now, but do it right. It shouldn't be so competitive to be able to get your story published. Most of the times you need an agent for any big company to even look at your book. So let's break down some of those barriers so more people can become authors. And I think that's what Nuri and I are trying to do. Is we don't just want to publish our own stories and be the authors of our own books. We also want to open the doors for more people to also become authors under our publishing house, and to be such a wonderful and inclusive publishing house that everyone wants to publish their books under our companies, because we're doing it right. We're doing it the authentic way.
Yeah, and for sure you have both inspired children across the nation and wanting to even just be writers themselves. And having both of you here, it is very powerful, because we also want to ensure that, our teachers are getting a good understanding of how important it is. And they know this, right? But we just want to send that reminder that we want them to continue to infuse the Hispanic Latino history and culture within their disciplines, so that the students, of course, continue to see themselves and others. And so I commend you both for doing the incredible work that you are doing. You are also making those significant contributions to our educational system. And so I both thank you from the bottom of my heart. Juliana, did you want to make a comment or question before we segue into our last presenter?
No, but I really enjoyed how she was talking about how they publish their books and all that stuff, because I love reading books. And I met this author that came to my school a couple months ago, and I got my own book signed from him. His name is James Ocean or something like that. And he wrote this book called City Spies, and I won this thing where he signed my name on it, he signed his signature, and I thought that was really cool how authors come to schools and they give kids their own books, and and maybe they could come to my school too, because we love reading and all that stuff. And yeah, I just thought that was really cool.
Thank you, Juliana, for sharing that. Well, gracias a las dos. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we're going to now transition to this lovely, lovely lady, Lilian Prado Carrillo. She migrated to the United States from Guatemala when she was only 4 years old. Her dad was the sole parent that raised her and taught her to have a very strong work ethic and ensured that she understood how important it was to get an education, how powerful that was. She did ultimately attend junior college only because she funded her own education by working, get this, to up to 50 hours per week, going to school part-time because of her immigration status. She did later on transfer and graduated from the Texas Women's University, where she received a full scholarship and quickly became an outstanding student leader, a campus motivator, and in fact, she was one of 30 students nationwide who was awarded the congressional internship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute in Washington, D.C. How about that? So she did go on to earn her master's degree in public administration from the University of North Texas. And since then, she's been an educator, a university administrator, a facilitator for national organizations such as the Monster Worldwide, the National Council of La Raza, Unidos Us, and in 2020, she was awarded the LULAC District 3 Woman of the Year Award. And so today she works as a full-time bilingual specialist at a Title I elementary school. And she recently received the Estrella de Tejas Award from the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas and San Antonio for her leadership and contributions to the community. And so she continues to just impact so many across the nation as a keynote speaker and a workshop facilitator working for the Educational Achievement Services, Cool Speak Youth Engagement, and Lifelong Legacies. Gracias, Lilian, por estar aquí con nosotros. Bienvenida.
Thank you so much. I've just been in awe listening to all the presenters and the authors and just everything. I love just everything that you guys have said. And every time that y'all said something, I was like, yes, keep saying that, right? As a bilingual educator, I think everything that you talked about is so important. We want to see our students, succeed. We want them to be able to dream. We want them to be able to see themselves in the positions that they want, and maybe the positions that they haven't even thought of, right? So all of that comes, I think, from our personal histories. All of that comes from our desire, to be and to live in a country where differences are celebrated, where we value students and their education, no matter where they begin, and actually just look at, the impossible limits, everything that they can achieve. And so I'm so excited to be here. Patricia, thank you so much. I've just learned so much. So I've already started looking at everybody on Facebook, and I'm like, I need to be Miss Nudi's friend over there in Georgia. I need to, just make all these connections. And I am here in Texas, so aquí está su humilde hogar for anything that you guys are, anytime that you guys are around these parts. So let me start off. I have so much to share with you guys, and I'd be so excited to take any questions at the very end. But I'm pretty much an open book. I do want to start off just kind of sharing my screen and talking to you a little bit about my history, and why I do the things that I do, why I love just the opportunities that I get to speak to students. Let me share this really quick. Are you guys good? Are you able to see that screen? Great. So I do get the awesome privilege of working for an organization called Cool Speak, aside from being an employee with the Denton ISD School District here in Denton, Texas, about 30 minutes north of Dallas. My position here is a bilingual specialist, which means I get to advocate for students' language acquisition for all emerging bilinguals. I help coach bilingual teachers, making sure that we're taking into consideration the language of instruction and making sure that we are allowing our students to simultaneously grow in their language acquisition. I think the days are gone where we used to say, oh, what's their L1? What's their first language versus what's their second language, right? We used to say newcomers are coming in, their first language is Spanish and their second language is going to be English, right? Now we have students who are simultaneous language learners and that are learning English and Spanish at the same time. And so that's why I'm so thrilled that all these bilingual authors are writing books simultaneously in English and in Spanish. We know that whenever we are developing and acquiring language, we know that we have kind of two pots to pull from, right? So if I don't know the word in one language, I can use my other pot, right, of language, and I can fill, right? So I know that in the past, people used to say, oh, no sabe ni uno ni el otro, he doesn't speak English, ni inglés ni español. Well, that's completely the wrong way to look at it. They have language in both, and they need to be able to use both to be able to get to the place where they want to be, right? And so through CoolSpeak, we are able to do this work. We're able to go out and talk to students all over the country, share parts of our history, because it is so important for our students to be able to see someone that looks like them or may have looked like them, who has experienced the things that they've experienced. And now look, they're getting to, travel around the country and talk to students. They're becoming authors, they're becoming anchors, they're nonprofit, philanthropists, all of these different things, as to where before we didn't have those things. Like Nori said, my dad was a brick packer, and I love, that he was a brick packer and an honest worker every single day of his life until his retirement, right? Being here in the country for 40 years. But I never thought that I could amount to being more than someone that cleaned offices or someone that served food or different things like that. And it wasn't until way later in life that I allowed myself little by little to dream that I could possibly go to college, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself too much, because I didn't want to, let myself down, or I didn't want to put that burden on my dad about talking about higher education when I knew that it may not be a possibility for me, or it wasn't in the cards for me, right? So let me get a little bit into that. So I always start off by talking to students and to parents and to educators, administrators, anyone, and letting them know que tu voz es tu poder. Your voice is your power, right? Our voices, whether we use them out loud or they're just in our mind, that little voice inside our head that tells us that we can or can't do it something. Sometimes we call it the imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's just a voice right in our head, has so much power, and we use it for either good or bad. And so I want to just challenge any administrator, any teacher, any educator, parent, student, that if you have that little voice inside your head that at one point or another tells you that you can't do something, that you kind of reprogram it, retrain your mind, and know that you're able to achieve so much, you're able to advocate and open doors for so many, if you just allow yourself to be that risk taker. This is Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, which I was so tickled that last year Dolores Huerta was on here. I'm like, Patricia, you are a rock star, because she is amazing. I love her to death. 91 years old, still block walking, still just being a fireball, right? But one of the reasons that I start off with this is because when I read books about Cesar and Dolores, and really more about Cesar, because there were no books about Dolores Huerta, right? There was nothing that allowed us to think that women were leaders. And so whenever I show this picture, even today, I say, guess who this is? And kids will say, his girlfriend. I'm like, hijo, no, she's like this major leader, like, organized in 1968, a great boycott, just this amazing, amazing woman. And we have no idea, just like our first presenter said, where we don't have an idea of who our leaders are because our textbooks don't reflect it. So let's be trailblazers. Let's challenge those ideas, right? And let's be positive and bring in all the contributions that Latinos have made to this country for so long. So I talk about her. I had the amazing honor of meeting her. I was so excited. I got 2 tickets to go see her speak, right? And I went to my husband. I told him, I said, Albert, I got 2 tickets. Guess who's coming to town? And I told him, and he was like, who? And I'm like, oh my God, tú también, And I said, but don't worry. I said, the ticket's not for you. And he said, well, who's the ticket for? And I said, the ticket is for Ayana, my daughter. And at the time, she was only 5 years old. She was only 5 years old. And so she thought we were going to go see this famous person, because I told her, baby, you got to get ready. Te miras bien bonita. We're going to go meet this amazing woman. She's famous. She's a leader. And she looked at me and she said, is it Taylor Swift? And I'm like, oh my God, we're full of these girls, right? And I said, no. So we went to see her. She looked at her and she said, Mom, that looks like my abuelita. I'm like, cállate, you don't know who you're talking to, But Dolores was so gracious that she signed the poster that I had gotten for Ayana and Camila when they were little. And she signed it, Si se puede, Dolores Huerta, to Ayana and Camila. Now, the reason that I start off like this is because my childhood was nothing like this. My childhood, the way that I was raised, is not like that. And so when I had my children, I knew that I had to be intentional in the way that I would raise my daughters, intentional in the way that I would teach my students, to make sure that they could see themselves beyond their wildest dreams, something that they could have never even thought of or experienced on their own, right? And so the way that I was raised was very much more humble. I was born in Guatemala in 1979, so I'll give away my age. The country had just come out of a civil war. Guatemala, if anybody knows the history, had a 30-year-long civil war, a bloody civil war, 300,000 people, indigenous people killed, right? There was no work. My dad decided to come to this country for many reasons. Like I heard other speakers say, my dad would say, Sometimes we didn't have money to eat. Sometimes we didn't have money, for the milk that you were gonna drink. Scares of living in this little house where my parents rented a room and the rats would come out at night because they could smell the milk, just such extreme poverty. And so my dad decided to come to this country. We came here, we were all undocumented, and it was, for politics and policy, that has nothing, it's not really anything that I'm trying to say right now, but for my own personal history, when my dad brought us here, I know that it was difficult. I have memories of coming and crossing the river on the shoulders of a coyote. I remember getting to this country and we thinking that everything was going to be just so amazing, but once you get here, you don't know the language, you don't know, if you've done the right thing. My dad fell into a deep depression, struggling with alcoholism and money, right? We were very poor, didn't know the language, any of it. My family of 4 quickly became a family of 2. My mom, when I was about 5 years old, decided that she could not stay with my dad. So I came home from kindergarten one day. She gave me a letter and said she was going to a gas station down the street. And when my dad opened the letter said that she wasn't coming back, that she was leaving. About 2 months later, she came back for my sister, took my sister to Guatemala to leave her there. And then I stayed with my dad. And so the reason for the title of my presentation, My Father's Daughter, is because I literally, from the time I was 5 years old, it was just me and him. Now I could sit here and tell you so many stories. We talk about what is education, and it's not just our teachers, it is a major part. But if my teacher respects my dad as my first teacher, then I have more respect for my teacher now. And I see that my dad is valued. I'm looking at him and, seeing how my dad wants me to do good. My dad attended every single PTA, not PTA, parent teacher conference meeting, even though I was the one translating, and so that worked in my favor sometimes. The teacher would say, "Oh, Mr. Prado, Lillian is doing so great." And I'm like, "Papi, dice que estoy muy bien." He's like, "Ah, qué bueno, mija, Prado, you're a puro Prado." And then she'd say, "Well, tell him that you talk sometimes, a little too much." And I'm like, "Papi, dice que estoy bien." And, he's like, he's like, "Hey, I know speaking very good English, but I understand," right? Always advocating, always making sure that the expectation that he had about my education was always high. As educators now, I know for a fact, I work in a Title I school. Our kids come from so much, hardships, so many things from home. And we have to make sure that as educators, we keep that standard high for them. I want to share, and I am going to share in a little bit, I think it's coming up, but just the tenets of bilingual education. And there are 3 that I want to share, 3 goals that I want to share, but I'll talk to you in 1 second. I do have this here because nunca eres lo suficientemente fuerte como para no necesitar la ayuda de otros. This means you are never sufficiently strong enough that you don't ever need the help of other people. Now, I had teachers that stepped in when my mother left. I had principals that gave me scholarships to go to camps when I was a little kid, things that I would have never experienced. I remember my assistant principal gave me a scholarship to go to a camp, and my dad couldn't take me, even though it was free. He couldn't take me because he couldn't miss work. The school secretary at my school offered to drive me to this camp so that I could have these experiences, right? I started working with my dad when I was 11, cleaning houses. My dad would mow the yards outside. When I was 15, I had a full-time job. 16, 17, I was in honors classes at school. I played sports, but I also worked. And it all caught up to me my senior year in high school. I ended up becoming truant. I was super late to school. Nobody thought to ask me why I was late. They just assumed that I didn't care because they saw a brown girl that was being late and wouldn't come to school sometimes. And so I ended up dropping out first semester of my senior year in high school. It was never what I wanted. I had a plan that I wanted to go to school, and I didn't know how it would go because there was no DREAM Act. There was no out-of-state tuition for students who were undocumented at the time, but I knew that that was my goal. But I ended up dropping out, and thank God that I had one of my friend's mom. My friend's name is Heather. And this lady who came and practically saved my life. She asked me, "Don't you want to go to school? Don't you want to have a better life?" And at first, when she asked me this, I was very afraid and I was very annoyed because I didn't think that she understood where I was coming from. But later on, she said, "Lillian, I want to help you." And so they took me in for 1 semester. I lived with them. I went back to school spring semester, my senior year. I graduated on time, graduated with honors. And then at the end of that semester, I went back to live with my dad. Here's my dad with my graduation diploma. I became the first person in my family to graduate from high school, the first person in my family to go on to college, first person to get a master's degree. And all of these firsts wouldn't have been possible without so many people. Now I share all of these different things because they matter, because it's the difference that educators can make in the life of a child. It's the difference that administrators can make in the life of students, right? In the culture that they set at the schools that they are running. It's the culture that the board of directors, the trustees are setting and are imparting, right? It's just all this trickle down effect where every child is valid, every child is worthy, right? To be invested in. This is a picture when I was a senior and I met a congressman in Washington, DC. Lo and behold, years later, I would go back to Washington, DC as an intern. And I was interning for Gene Green, congressman out of Houston. Through the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. I only share this story because when they were supposed to call me to see if I would have gotten the internship, they didn't call. And so I was so bummed. I went back, I told my dad, no me llamaron, papi, and he's like, oh, it's okay, mija. But secretly, he was happy that I wasn't leaving because he was definitely afraid that I would go off to DC by myself. The next day they call me and they tell me, hey, you got it. Sorry, we were short staffed, but you're coming to DC. I go out, I tell my dad, papi, me llamaron. And he's like, I tell him, I said, me voy a Washington. And he's like, nos vamos. And I'm like, no, not you, But he was so happy. He told everybody in our town that I was going to work at the White House. And I was like, it's the Capitol building. It's not the White House. It's the white building, but it's just a different white building, right? All of these things were possible because other people poured into my life. I had administrators, teachers, counselors, academic people, organizations like Upward Bound, Talent Search, telling me, Lillian, you can do this. Lillian, you can dream big. Lillian, you can go to college. Lillian, you can apply for these things and these opportunities will come to you. If any students are listening today, I do want to say, don't wait for other people to push you along. I think that was a huge mistake. Be that same little voice inside your own head that tells you you are able to achieve these things and so much more. All you have to do is try. So this is me in front of the White House. We were having a reception for the President of Poland. After I went back from Washington, DC, my mind and my just way of thinking was hugely different and hugely impacted. I learned about organizations like LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. I learned about organizations like NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. I learned about HACU, Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. I learned about NCLR, the National Council of La Raza, all these huge organizations. And I'm like, oh my God, and they're all advocating for our rights and they're all fighting. And I just got this fire under me that said, this is what you need to do. And this is what your passion is, to make sure that all people know that you have access, that they have access to higher education if that is what they want. For us to maintain the beauty in our culture and our language and our just way of being, right, our identity, and that it's okay to be part of this huge melting pot, right, that we call the United States of America. After that, I graduated from college and my dad was super excited. He threw this big dinner for me and I noticed that everybody was eating and my poor dad estaba sirviendo. He was giving the food out, right? And instead of me sitting down with my friends, I went and I put an apron on myself too. And I said, if my dad's going to be a servant leader, then that's the type of leader I also want to be. So he made a huge impact on my life, even though he only had a 6th grade education. I became a bilingual education teacher here in Texas, where all of my students, 100% were Hispanic. Most of them were Mexican. They had a huge gap. They wanted to do so many things, but they didn't know. And so by the end of that first year, all of my kids were saying, I'm going to college, and they knew who Cesar Chavez was. They knew who Dolores Huerta was. They were allowed to dream, not just thinking about, I have to be a doctor because I need to make money, but being allowed to dream and saying, I want to be a doctor, not because I want to make money, but because I want to find a cure to cancer, or because I want to have, I want to develop these new procedures, or being allowed to dream and to dream big. Now, I wanted to show you this, and I know this is a lot of words, so if you have your phone, if you want to take a picture of this, please do. But I want to advocate for bilingual education. If you saw the picture right here, all these beautiful brown faces, this is who I serve every single day because these are the kids that look just like me, right? When I was a kid. Dr. Jose Medina with Education Solutions, he talks about 3 goals of dual language education or bilingual education. Bilingualism and biliteracy, right? Making sure that we are are able to speak, to write, to read, and to listen, right? And to make connections between the two languages, like I said, using each one to fill in the gaps that the other has, right? We use this through cognates. We look at it whenever we're looking at Latin word roots, prefixes and suffixes, bridging lessons for our students so that we can merge those two languages and let them realize how strong and how amazing they are for knowing the two. The second goal is grade level academic achievement in both programs, right? Not just because we're in bilingual classes are we going to lower the level of expectation. In fact, we're going to raise it, where our expectation is going to be even higher because you have two places, right, to pull from. So grade level expectations in all content area. Bilingual education or dual language, right, for emerging bilingual should also include special areas, PE, art, music, both offered in both languages. And so I love like having all of these books who are both in English and in Spanish, right, so that we can have in our libraries and we can have in our special areas at schools. And the last one, who I think some people try to gloss over, but it's really an injustice when we do, right? That students, educators, parents, and community members embrace their roles as advocates and overtly speak about cultural and linguistic equity, right? That we allow our students to feel that their parents are coming with a language that we all should learn, right? Spanish is super diverse, right? I made a joke last night on Facebook where I asked people, what are phrases in English that we cannot, or phrases in Spanish that you cannot translate into English? There were so many. I was laughing almost all night, right? But this is where we as educators come and we merge these things for our students, right? It's kind of like a secret that says, hey, by you knowing English and Spanish, you can talk to so much, you know, billions of people across this world just by knowing and maintaining both of your languages. You should be proud, you should be happy, right? Stakeholders defend the right to access diverse curriculum and instructional materials. This is where we advocate and tell our principals, hey, have you heard of Nuri Castillo Crawford? You know, you need to buy her book. You know, another school district just paid, you know, 1,000 books they ordered in for that. Hey, we need to do that too, right? We need to advocate for that. And then allowing all our students, or allowing them to understand and to know that all student languages, including regionalisms and or accents, are valued. So many times we have students who say, well, I don't speak English because I have too much of an accent. It's okay, it's beautiful, let's use it. So many times long are gone are the days where we used to say, as even Spanish speakers, no se dice troca, se dice, you know, camioneta. Well, sí, se dice camioneta correctamente, ¿verdad? Pero se puede decir troca. I understand what you're saying, right? And look and bridge those the academic language with the social language, and then bring value to all of it. So that whenever they hear their parents talk, they feel celebrated, they feel valued, they feel important. After teaching a few years, I became a spokesperson, and so I got to live on a bus. That's something you don't hear every day. So inside this bus, it was decked out as a financial aid office on wheels. My job for a whole year was to go around the country and talk to students about going to college, about accessing higher education, about applying for scholarships. And I'll tell you the only reason, or maybe not the only reason, but probably two of the strongest reasons that they picked me to be this national spokesperson was because, number one, I was bilingual. I could deliver that message in English and in Spanish. And number two, I was willing to share my story. I'm not ashamed of where we came from, right? I'm very proud of being an immigrant and being a person that has worked super hard for the things that we have. And my dad has worked just as hard. And so I traveled the country for 9 months. I did about 35 different states, 55 different cities. And I talked to about 40,000 people live, and not to mention all the radio and TV as well. I wanted to show this because when people talk to me about bilingual education, they say, "Hi, es que maestra, I just want him to learn English," right? Or the mentality that says we just need him to learn English. They don't need to retain that Spanish. I looked at this, and there was on the Washington Post this article, and it said 1.5 billion learners of English, right? English is by far the most common studied foreign language in the whole world. But look at Spanish, 14.5 million, right? I look at that, and then I look at this, and I'm like, okay, out of 7.2 billion people on earth, right? I speak English and I speak Spanish. Already, I'm looking at 527 million plus 389 million. I can talk to that many people, right? As opposed to if I'm only have one language. I'm also looking, man, Italian and French. I can probably defend myself if I go to those countries because Spanish has so many ties. It's the Romance languages, right? And so all of these things are super important. There was one thing on that article that said, according to the CIA, Spanish is spoken by 4.85% of the world's population, and it's even used more widespread than English, which is spoken by only 4.83. I'm sure these stats are changing, but I drive this point to say, when I'm looking at my students here in Texas and anywhere, right, I'm letting them know that yes, you do need to learn English and we need to speak it to the best of our abilities, and we need to read and write and everything else, but you retain that Spanish because that's going to make you more aware. It's going to keep you connected to your family. It's going to be part of your identity, right? We celebrate all of those things. Whenever I was able to go to college, I came back home, I married, but I was still wanting to pursue higher education. I got my MPA in 2013, a master's in public administration. A few years later at Texas Women's University, where I got my undergrad, I became the commencement speaker, and I spoke to more than 2,000 people about what it means to be a bilingual educator, about what it means to be a person that started with not much. You know, I don't say that I came from nothing because I don't believe that any of us come from nothing. We all come from something, right? I came from cumbia dances and Snicker bars and carne asadas, and my dad's friends that were called pistolero and aguacate. And those of y'all that speak Spanish are gonna get that because we are crazy with our nicknames, right? But my dad went to that commencement speech with me, and he cried, and he said, you know, it's just come full circle. I never thought that you would be able to do these things, but this is the reason why we came to this country, because he knew that had we stayed in Guatemala, I wouldn't have had these opportunities. And this is what he made possible by making that courageous decision and coming here. So now I get to work for CoolSpeak. I get to travel the country and talk to students all over the place. About 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, but thank God I'm in full remission now. But that didn't stop me, pelona, you know, and everywhere, but I was still going, and the kids were super gracious and just loved on me, and, you know, just wanted to know the story and wanted to know how they could also pursue education. I do some awesome work with the League of United Latin American Citizens here in Texas with our District 3, and just, you know, making sure that all of our students and all of our families know that people are advocating for them, making sure that college is accessible, raising scholarships, educating people, sharing our stories, and letting people know we are not so different, you and I. Anybody that comes from any other place, right, no matter where you are, I can find more things that we have in common than I can that are different. This one, little one right here in the white, is my daughter. I have to call her out because she's so pretty. I've had some amazing opportunities. I got to go talk to people, the caravans that are coming into the United States and are still at our borders, just asking where their stories are, trying to understand why they're here, trying to understand, you know, the commonalities that we all want. And it's that desire for a better life. We advocate for clean water for all people, right? Making sure that people have the things that they need. But this is just a little bit of the work that we're doing and the work that we're trying to make sure that other students are doing as well. This is my family a few years ago. All the boys are grown now. This one right here is a United States Marine. This one right here is in the Army. Our 21-year-old, he is currently still in school, and then my girls and my husband. But this is in essence who I am, and this is in essence who I'll always be. It's that little girl, you know, that my dad, whenever the teacher called him and said, Mr. Prado, Lillian cannot see the board because she likes to wear her hair like this over, you know, I was trying to be cool with my bangs, you know, my dad's like, no puedo ver, okay. He came and cut my hair right here, and it was like this. So every day I went to school, I was like, hello, yes, I can see now, you know, but that was the kid that I am. And I'll end with this. We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about the progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and the needs of others for their sake and for our own. This is a Cesar Chavez quote. I love it, right? And I'm trying my best to raise my children and to live this out for myself. My daughter, who was 5 at the time when she met Dolores Huerta, by the time she was 10, she was speaking and testifying in front of our city council here in Denton, because she needs to know that she comes with many privileges, right? And not everybody has those privileges. We have to advocate and look out for others. And then my dad, after 40 years, became a United States citizen. So he called me and said, mija, ya soy gringo. So he was so happy and so proud. And I'm so proud of him. And I'm so thankful that he had the sight to see the future that I didn't know was possible. But like I said, there's so many teachers, educators, principals, people from all over the place, you know, that just poured so much into me when I didn't have much. And although I didn't have a mom, I can look right now at my life and say I had 20 women who stepped in and gave me so much love and so much hope, just for the future that I have. And so thank you so much. I know I talked super fast because there's so many things that I wanted to share, but I'm so thankful for you guys. I'm so thankful, Patricia, for the work that you're doing, and anything that I can be of service, please let me know. I'd be love to connect with any and each of you. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for being here with us. I mean, your passion shows, and we're just grateful for you being here and just being authentic and sharing your true journey. I welcome the audience to share their thoughts, questions, or comments. All right, let's take a look at this and see. As an educator, what is the most important thing that Latino students need?
Ooh, that's a great question that Latino students need. Honestly, I think it's an opportunity for them to know that education is accessible to them at all levels, right? From the time that a child is in kinder and first grade, I'm already telling them, about college and trying to get different things in front of them so that as they go, right, not expecting them to understand fully, but as they go, they're being expected to continue to go on, continue to be able to achieve different things, right? I also think exposure, right? They said exposure to different authors, exposure to books, exposure to just different ways of thinking, ways of reflecting what they're learning, right? So long are gone are the days that I maybe I have to write everything. Maybe it's oral assessments. Maybe it's me using my language and my Spanglish, right, to be able to express what I'm learning. I also think we also need to look at students, not just Latino students, but all students as holistic students, holistic people, looking at their their SEL needs, right? What is it that they're needing at school? Acknowledging the things that they're going through at home, especially if you're working in a Title I school, right? But then kind of having a spot that says, okay, hun, I know things might be hard at home. Did you eat breakfast? No, I didn't eat. Okay, aquí están some crackers. Here's some water. Here, come here. I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to talk about it, right? Not letting them lower their level of academic achievement because of the things that are happening at home. As educators, we can't impact everything that's happening at home, but what we can do is provide a safe spot here, provide a place where they know that they are safe, where they know that they are allowed to be risk takers, that they don't have to always be correct, right? But that they do always have to try, that they do always have to meet some level of expectation where they're trying to just be the students that we know that they can be, right? I also think that having parent engagement, and now it's not even just parent engagement, but family engagement, providing opportunities at schools to not only, have the parents here. We're not going to bring the parents and then send the kids off over there. Let's bring them together. Let's do family engagement. Let's teach our parents, what are we looking for in literacy? You're not just, decoding. Are you talking about comprehension? Are you talking about, the characters? Are you making connections with your own life? So it's just so many things, right, that we can do. Definitely bring our parents in, but also letting the students know, hey, it doesn't matter where we start. It matters what you do here. Here you are loved. Here you are valued. Here you are respected. And here we want you to just thrive and to achieve the things that they want to achieve, right? And to be patient with them. So many students we're gonna need to be able to fill in the gap that COVID has created, and we know that COVID has impacted the way that our students relate to each other, the way that they relate to teachers, the way that they learn, the time that they're spending on screens, all of those different things we have to be able to take into consideration, right? But Latino students specifically, like the other presenters have said, I definitely want them to know that there's so many things that they haven't even considered, and just to keep their mind open and to do the best that they can and let opportunities come to them, because I'm sure that those will come. Sorry,
Wow, thank you for that. No, it was perfect. Juliana, go ahead.
How does Spanish connect Hispanic and Latinos?
Oh man, so this is what I was telling you guys that I was looking at Facebook, right? And I had put on there just with friends, and then in the group that I am with bilingual and dual language educators, and I said, what is it in Spanish, that we can't translate to other languages, and things like chiflada, how do you translate chiflada into English? Like a chiflo is like a whistle. Most people, right? And different words mean different things to different people from different countries, right? So Puerto Ricans use different words, like for the bus, for el autobús, dicen la guagua, and in Mexico, dicen la camioneta, or, but Spanish is so rich that there are some words that if I say, I no seas chiflada, you can't translate that into English. Chiflada is like, hey, what? No, don't be whistly. Like, that makes no sense. Chiflada means like, don't be, don't be crazy, or don't be spoiled, or don't be, I can't even translate it, but Spanish just connects us through music. There are some things that whenever I try to translate a Mark Anthony song into English, my friends all laugh and they're like, yeah, you lost the meaning. Like, it's not going to work, right? But Spanish is so rich and so diverse, right, that it connects all Latinos, even if we're not all saying the same thing. I'll give you an example. My husband is Chilean and Mexican, but he was born and raised in Los Angeles. So he says he's 100% Órale Holmes, I am originally from Guatemala. So I still, when my family comes over, we talk like Guatemalans, say, a la gran puchica, vos, ¿cómo estás? No estás pajeando, pajeando means lying, and he's like, what are y'all saying? I can't even understand. But then when I explain it, like, there's still that connection, there's still that richness, there's still that richness in the way that we connect and the way that we speak to each other and the way that we identify certain words. Names even have a stronger, at least for me, to my ears, right? Names, like my daughter's name is Julieta. I love Julieta. I don't want her to be Juliet. I want her to be Julieta, right? Those are these strong names that we give our children for many, many reasons. And so I think Spanish, we know that there's so many students and so many people that have lost their language, or parents for one reason or another, maybe when they were in school weren't allowed to speak Spanish. And so with fear, they haven't allowed their students to, or their kids to learn. So for whatever reason, there are those that have lost it. But I think it's not what makes you Hispanic. It's not what makes you Latino, right? There's just something in there that connects us. When I go into a supermarket, or when I go into a place where normally there aren't a lot of Latinos and I hear someone speak Spanish, there's something in there that makes me feel connected. It makes me feel like part of a greater whole, I guess. And so although I don't think it's 100% the identity of Latinos, I think that it has so much impact on who we are, the movies that we see, the shows that we watch, Chespirito, just things that, if you're not Latino and you don't speak Spanish, that you've lost. But it's something definitely that is worth celebrating, and it's something that's definitely worth retaining. We have all these organizations, right? In Texas, we have the Texas Association of Bilingual Educators. Across the nation, we have NABID, the National Association of Bilingual Educations. California has a huge organization, and they put out so much material about the importance of preserving Spanish and the importance of preserving it, not only to speak it, but also just as part of our identity. And so the play on words is huge. The way that we're able to manipulate the language and to bridge and to connect with so many people is huge. So I think that's one of the things that it does. It's kind of connects us all together, whether you're from Chile or Bolivia or Guatemala or Puerto Rico, there's all something there that connects us together. 31 countries in the world speak Spanish. I don't know if you all know that. 31.
Yes. And the second most spoken language as well. So there are certainly variations, linguistic variations among the Hispanic Latinos. And then going back to your comment about the Wawa, now my girls, they refer to the Wawa, or at least they process that as the gas station.
Yeah. If you had said Wawa to me, I would have been like, a dog? Like, okay, Yes.
Right. We had that rich conversation at home, and they were like, but mommy, it's the gas station over there. But no, we were talking about the bus. Coast, yeah. The bus, right. So in Mexico, you're right. It's camioneta. And then my husband, they referred to it in Puerto Rico, la Wawa. So it was like, it was a really great conversation. But to them, it was the gas station, the Wawa. Yeah. And so in going back to what you were also saying about the connection with regard to the language, I think that's a very important piece. So I'm glad that you highlighted that aspect of it as well. I see that there's a question here. Juliana, do you want to ask the next one?
Yes. Why the name Cool Speak?
So it's so funny because CoolSpeak is a youth engagement company. It was founded by two friends, Ernesto Mejia and Carlos Ojeda Jr. I met these guys in 2006 at a NCLR conference, National Council La Raza conference, which is now Unidos US. And I had just come off of that tour that I did all over the United States. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was coming back to Texas. And I just, thought, well, I'll just, go teach again, or maybe I'll go get another, like my master's degree or something. And I met the presenter at NCLR, and he was giving a keynote speech. And I was introduced to him, Carlos Ojeda, and he said, we're always looking for Latina speakers. Like, there are no Latina speakers, Latina motivational speakers, and I said, well, I don't know if I can be a motivational speaker. And he said, sure you can. So they had me come audition in Houston. And that's where we started working together under the direction of Consuelo Castillo Kickbush, who was the highest ranking Latina woman in the Army at one point. And she left all of that right before she became a general to do this type of work. And so she kind of developed us, she kind of helped us become speakers. And then CoolSpeak merged off and made their own youth engagement company. And so now we have, they probably have about maybe 20 youth speakers that travel all around the country. We all love sharing our stories, and we all are doing it for the right reasons, because we love students and because we want to invest in the holistic child, and we want to be able to challenge them and for them to see themselves in all of us. And so we have speakers, that are Hispanic, African-American, white, speaking different languages. We have one guy who was a WWE wrestler. He was the first WWE wrestler with only one leg. He competed on American Ninja Warrior. Like, we just have a lot of these amazing people who have a heart of gold and who want to invest in the youth of our country. And so CoolSpeak is the name that they came up, because I think we're trying to reach young people, and definitely just speaking from the heart, but also keeping it real and keeping it cool. So I think that's their way that they called that the organization that name. But it's amazing. You guys can go online, Google it, coolspeak.net. And we are here just to give any kind of motivational talks, community organizations, youth, any staff development for teachers, educators at the university level, and also at the K-12 level. And so aquí estamos para servirles.
And you know what, Lillian, we actually did have Castillo Kickbush be part of our 8th annual Latino Institute 2 years ago.
Cool.
Yes, yes.
When I
phenomenal.
met her, I heard her speak when I was an undergrad, and I remember being so moved by the things that she said, and I wanted to get in line to go meet her. And the line literally did not move for like 2 hours, because these people were just wanting to pour out their soul to her. So when I met Carlos, and he was like, hey, come down to Houston, my mentor's there, she wants to meet you. It's, Consuelo. And I was like, what? I was like, I stood in line for 2 hours to meet this lady. And so she poured into us. She let us know, what it is to be a servant leader, and how to be able to strategically tell our story for the benefit of others. Not only is it for us, I really, at least for myself, I always pray and I make sure that whatever comes out of my mouth is something that someone in the audience needs to hear, not so much what I want to share. So I hope that's true.
No, absolutely. It was definitely an honor to have her, as it is an honor to have you here and sharing your powerful story. So yes, continue speaking from your heart and keeping it real and keeping it cool.
Yes, cool.
Yes. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us this evening, this morning, depending on when you decide to join us virtually. And we look forward to continuing to bring these opportunities for everybody to continue to grow professionally, so that we can ensure that we are infusing Hispanic contributions made in the United States in every single subject area, from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. Bueno, muchas gracias, and everybody have a good one, and we'll see you at the next one.